G'day everyone, El Wapo here, and I hope you're doing amazingly well. I've been looking for videos recently that'll assist me in determining if a game like The Division 2 is worth my long-term investment of time. And I'm sure many of you, like me, have no time. As such, I want to give you my initial impressions of The Division 2 in its early game, so you can understand whether the early game was worth my time. I'll release further videos in the mid to late game as well, including PvP, Dark Zone, so you can assess if it was worth my time, maybe it might be worth yours. I'm not going to discuss the Anthem vs Division 2 debate that is currently raging, as I don't believe that is relevant to this video, save to say that I've played Anthem and the quality, diversity and richness I expected was not delivered. So, let's get into it. Guys, visuals. Division 2 is obviously built on the framework of quality of life patches and enhancements that made the Division what it is today. And that being said, the Snowdrop engine has been used to provide greatly enhanced visuals in the form of lighting, both dynamic and static, weather effects, and animations. As I began my journey into the sprawling metropolis of Washington DC, I found myself slowing down and actually taking the time to enjoy the world Massive has built. Light filters through the trees and it bounces off reflective surfaces, interacts with effects like fog and rain to create vastly different gaming experiences depending on the time of day that you are operating. There's no current support for RTX or DLSS, but I can see that it would be used to good effect in this game. Whether you would be willing to take the FPS hit or not, even with DLSS enabled, is another story though, and I've not seen any information from Ubisoft regarding future support for either technology. So the weather, guys, as I stated, it's dynamic and it drastically changes your experience both tactically and visually. Fog obscures your vision, bringing it in much closer, and it makes it harder to spot enemies and gear. It therefore provides legitimacy to the sensor suite that you use that scans nearby areas for enemies and equipment. And although I found this feature to be somewhat redundant in the first division due to the fact that by the time I'd scanned the enemy, I could have quite often have initiated the contact, wiped them all out, and searched the loot, it's still a good effective tool, right? And the fact that Massive is using the environment to create these tactical changes is fantastic. Rain also obscures your vision, but more importantly, it changes the reflective dynamics of the game, and it adds depth, realism, and a level of finished polish that I'm really enjoying in an MMO. Enemy animations are also drastically improved, everyone. Combined with the less spongy enemy feel, it makes combat feel more responsive and your weapons more realistic. There have been moments when I've been pumping rounds into an enemy with high armor values, but I've been able to use their weakness such as fire to mitigate that armor, get a quicker kill, and crack on. Enemy animations are relevant to the combat situation as well. On multiple occasions, I noticed a tank signaling to his mates across the room as he set up an MG, trying to tell them to flank me. And as I looked over in the direction of the signal, I noticed that his mates were moving forward, trying to suppress, trying to flank. It's the ability to read body language in a game like this that really allows you to feel immersed, take in as much data as you possibly can, and feel like you're genuinely creating your own story, affecting the combat situation in your own way, and living because you have made a decision. Animations, however, aren't much without the systems that bind them, and those systems have been refreshed and built upon since the first game. The enemy AI is competent. They're not amazing, but they're pretty competent. But they're better supported by effectively placed spawn points which allow reinforcements and dramatic changes to the combat scenario. No longer can you just suppress an enemy with a push tactic that means you can just move forward. You'll find yourself surrounded, forced to relocate, fight your way rearwards, often using your abilities for defense as opposed to offense to recuperate armor and crack on. It's those situations that I believe give the combat in this game legs. You're never sure how a situation will develop, and when you need to react, you have to do it in a different way using different tactics and different abilities. In line with your abilities, the drones in the Division 2 come with the ability to task to target. I found this frustrating at times when I've forgotten about them in a firefight, however their value is far superior when considered in the context of offense. You could, for example, task a turret drone to attack an enemy on your left, an air drone to attack an enemy on your right, and you could sit back and recuperate. Or you could task them both to target on your right whilst you flank to the left. It's these different options in combat that allow you to really customize a scenario and to be involved in the world. The mechanics behind the loot that you pick up from this combat are also vastly improved. Gear is predominantly better than your old stuff, and it's widely varied and it's fully customizable, the same as it was in the first division. But ultimately, guys, it's interesting and it's cool. It looks different. It applies different effects to your character, and it all works differently to create a very different combat experience depending on what you pick. Supporting that gear system is recalibration. An awesome idea, right? If you like a piece of kit and you want to wear it, but you don't want it to change your stats, you can recalibrate your old stats from your old piece of gear onto that new piece, meaning your character looks different, but maintains his different abilities. Awesome. The final point, guys, is content. I've noticed in previous looter shooters and MMOs in general that mediocre content is considered by a dev and publisher team to be good enough for you. Games like the original Division, Anthem, and Fallout 6 all expected that the discerning public would accept mediocre content for games that are consistently overhyped during pre-release conferences. To Massive and Ubisoft's credit, they seem to be the only team listening to their players on a consistently long duration, providing clarity and accurate feedback to develop their product to a point where it's suitable for you, the gamer, to part with your hard-earned money and time. And it's also worth noting that the rectification of the original Division occurred long before other MMO failures. Massive set the standard for accepting responsibility and fixing their original product, to the point where this game is set upon the framework of their old game. Guys, I don't find the story in the Division any better than the first. That's not to say it's not good, it just hasn't grabbed me yet. Yes, the dollar flu ravaged the world, yes, some people are rebuilding, and there's bosses who seem to be named Lieutenant Smith and General Kelly, but with all looter shooters, I find myself burning and churning through the story in order to reach endgame. That said though, kudos needs to be given to Massive, who no doubt knew that the bulk of us will do that, but still put time and effort into the story in order for it not to be a filler. It is good enough to be interested in if you want to, and I find myself, even when burning through the maps, stopping to enjoy the moment, understand the plot, and consider the situation. I think the fact that Massive has worked on the story is a very important teaching point for other developers. Just because you know your target audience won't focus on that aspect of your game does not mean it is not important to the overall quality, feel, and completion of your product. In line with content, guys, sound content is crisp and heavy.
Fuck! You like daddy? Stop the wrong. Yeah, let's get it.
The depth of sounds from weapons and explosions adds to the intensity of firefights, some of which can rage for up to 10 minutes. Coupled with a soundtrack that is dynamic and effective, it really added to my immersion, making me feel like my avatar was part of something bigger, progressing through a story which was important and that mattered. It's not huge, but all of the previous effects I've spoken about, combined with this sound, rounds out to create a single experience which I'm finding enjoyable and effective at keeping me engaged in order to commit my time. Guys, the city feels full. Where New York felt empty with predictable mobs as fillers, nothing really going on, bland, snowy wasteland, Washington is filled with different mobs from different gangs conducting different nefarious activities. As you progress from mission to mission, you are guaranteed to come across things like executions, muggings, lootings, even dudes just conducting physical exercise. And they can often be supported by a random nearby spawn. So you might commit to that mob of 3 who's just doing some push-ups, only to find yourself fighting 5 more from a nearby house. And it's that type of dynamic and thoughtful content that adds depth and realism to your time in DC. I've found myself quite often taking on a small mob, and out of nowhere a larger boss character will come out of a spawn, drop me some awesome loot, and keep me refreshed and engaged in that run in between a safe house and a mission. So with all that said, guys, the Division 2 for me has so far been a refreshing and thoroughly enjoyable experience. Massive's taken a strong target audience focus in the development, and they've made this game accessible, quality, and strong in its initial impression. It's simply fun, it's absorbing, content's engrossing, visuals are effective, it's dynamic, and it's beautiful. It's also not bland and plain in its combat. Most importantly, I think it's worth your time. I'll update more videos as I get to mid and late game. I'll update PvP, Dark Zone, and the intent is that you'll see me waste my time so you don't have to waste yours. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.